Alright guys, so check this out. People have been seeing some wild shit for centuries. Ghosts, UFOs, shadow people, you name it. And the crazy part? Every culture's got the same kind of stories. You go to Bangladesh, they'll tell you about jinn in the rivers. In Thailand, it's spirits behind temples. Here, it's old houses and graveyards. And whether you believe it or not, the people telling these stories, they're dead serious. Now, I'm not saying every creak in your house is a ghost. Could be your AC, could be your brain messing with you. But man, when you get enough people across the world saying the same exact thing, that makes me stop and go, hold on, maybe there's something here. So today, we're going to dig into it. Real stories, real people, stuff that'll make you sleep with the lights on. This is the kind of shit I love. Paranormal, unexplained, the edges of what we know. Let's get into it. The Nursing Home Haunting. Submitted by James L. I used to work night shifts at a small nursing home. Most patients were asleep by midnight, so the halls stayed quiet. But every so often, I'd hear a woman crying faintly, like it was coming from the walls. We'd check every room, and all the residents would be sound asleep. One night, the crying was louder, almost like it was right behind me. I turned and saw a figure in white at the end of the hall. She was tall, thin, and her face was completely blacked out, like a shadow. I blinked, and she was gone, but the crying never stopped. It just circled the halls. Another nurse quit after she found the same woman leaning over a patient's bed. The patient passed away that night. After that, no one wanted to cover the third floor alone. Even the call lights would flicker in empty rooms, and doors slammed when the hallway was still. The last night I worked there, I heard the crying again, only this time it was inside the room with me. The temperature dropped so fast my breath showed. I felt someone brush my shoulder, but no one was there. I walked out, didn't clock out, and never went back. Dude, a woman leaning over a patient's bed, crying at night, doors slamming on their own, that's not just spooky, that's nightmare fuel. I don't care if you're rational, that kind of thing sticks with you. The Old Farmhouse. Submitted by Rachel M. I grew up in a farmhouse. My parents always said it had character, but to me, it always felt heavy, like the air was thicker in certain rooms. The upstairs hallway was the worst cold spots, creaking floorboards when nobody was there, and shadows that moved against the light. One night when I was 12, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my door. Thinking it was my mom, I called out. No answer. The steps stopped right at my door, and I could see a faint shadow under the crack, but no one opened it. After a few minutes, the shadow just drifted away without a sound. Years later, I came home from college and stayed in that same room. Around 3 a.m., I felt the mattress sink, as though someone sat down beside me. I froze, too scared to move. When I finally reached for the lamp, the weight lifted, but there was a deep impression left in the blankets, slowly fading. When I finally asked my dad if he'd ever felt anything, he admitted he'd seen a woman in a long dress standing in the hallway at night. He said he thought it was just his imagination until I told him my story. None of us talk about it much, but even now, I swear that house isn't empty. Man, that old farmhouse story is next level creepy. You've got shadows moving, whispers in empty rooms, cold spots, and someone or something just standing at the door. That's exactly the kind of encounter that sticks with you. I wouldn't spend a night there for anything. The Shakchuni. Submitted by Farhana A. My grandmother's village had an old banyan tree near the riverbank. Everyone warned us never to linger there after sunset because that's where the Shakchuni, the spirit of a married woman who died tragically, was said to live forever, searching for her husband. One evening during a power outage, I was walking home past that tree. I heard anklets jingling behind me, light and delicate, though no one was there. When I turned, I saw a woman in a red sari, her long hair covering her face, standing completely still under the branches. At first, I thought she was human, but then I noticed her feet, they were backwards. She lifted her head slightly, and I caught a glimpse of her face. Hollow eyes, skin stretched tight, and a wide grin full of blackened teeth. She began gliding toward me without lifting her feet. I ran, but the sound of anklets kept following until I stumbled into the courtyard of my grandmother's house, When I looked back, the road was empty, but the sound of her anklets still echoed faintly in the night. My grandmother lit incense and whispered, "She chose to let you go." Yo, a shakchuni in the middle of the rice fields, arms dragging the ground, smiling wide, that's like folklore come to life. I would never go near those fields alone at night. Black Magic. Submitted by Diego R. When I was 16, my cousin dared me to follow him to the outskirts of our village, where an old woman was said to practice brujeria negra, black magic. They called her La Curandera Negra. People swore she could kill a man with a single curse, or bind his soul to her forever. We crept to her shack just before midnight. The smell of rotting meat hit us first. Inside, we saw candles around a wooden table. On it, bones, human bones, some still stained dark, and in the center, a photograph of a man's face, pierced with rusty nails through the eyes and mouth. Suddenly, the candles flared, though no one touched them. We heard whispers, hundreds of them, circling us. Then the old woman appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were white, and her voice came in two tones at once. She pointed at us. My cousin screamed and fell to the ground. I dragged him away, but he wouldn't stop convulsing. His mouth foamed, and his skin went gray as we ran. By the time we reached home, he wasn't breathing. My uncle called it a seizure, but I saw his chest cave in, like something crushed him from the inside. We buried him 2 days later. The next night, I woke to scratching at my window. It was my cousin's voice, whispering my name, begging me to let him in. I moved away the same week, but sometimes when I dream, I still hear him scratching. And in the morning, there are marks on the glass. Dude, that Mexican black magic story is insane. Cursed photos, nails through faces, shadows moving, whispers in your head like straight up horror. That's the kind of thing that makes you question what's real. I wouldn't mess with black magic for anything, man. The Maynac Rice Fields. Submitted by Knock. I grew up in a small village outside Ayutthaya. Everyone knew about the spirit that haunted the old rice fields near the river. They said she was a Maynac, a ghost who died in childbirth, but her love for her husband kept her tied to this world, angry and restless. One night, my friends dared me to walk past the fields alone. The air was thick with the smell of jasmine, even though no flowers grew there. Suddenly, I heard a woman whispering my name, drawn out and soft. When I turned, I saw a tall figure with long black hair, swaying slowly in the moonlight. Her body looked normal until I noticed her arms stretching unnaturally long, reaching almost to the ground. I froze as she began to move toward me, her face pale and swollen, eyes black like water. Her mouth opened wide as if she was about to scream, but no sound came out, just silence. I ran as fast as I could back to the village, but when I looked over my shoulder, she was gliding just above the ground, closing the distance without moving her feet. I barely made it home. My grandmother burned incense and told me never to cross the fields at night again. I've listened ever since. Man, the Maynac story is wild. A ghost clinging to someone after death, appearing in your home, bending reality around you that's next level terrifying. You think you're alone, and then you realize there's something watching you, waiting. I wouldn't want to experience that. Battlefield Ghosts. Submitted by Mark T. I was deployed in Afghanistan in 2011. One morning, on patrol, I stepped on an IED. The blast threw me 20 feet. My legs were torn up, ears ringing, and I couldn't move. I remember staring at the sky, dirt falling like rain, and thinking, this is it. I'm dying here. As I drifted in and out, I saw shadows moving around me, not my squad, but tall, thin figures in the dust. They didn't have faces, just hollow shapes that bent over me, watching. My radio crackled, but instead of voices, it was whispers, like they were speaking inside my head. One crouched close, and I swear I felt its hand press on my chest. Suddenly, the pain vanished. My whole body went numb, but I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled, and the world turned gray. It felt like they were pulling something out of me, like I was being peeled away from myself. I heard my sergeant screaming my name, but it was faint, like underwater. The figure leaned closer, and I saw where its face should have been just endless black. Then, in that void, 1,000 screaming mouths opened at once. I've never felt terror like that before or since. Next thing I remember, I woke up in Germany, bandaged and broken, but alive. The doctor said I was lucky to make it. But sometimes at night, when I'm half asleep, I feel that numbness again, like they didn't finish the job, like they're still waiting to take me back. Wow. Getting hit by an IED, then seeing shadow figures pulling you out of your body, that's insane. That's the kind of stuff that would haunt anyone for life. Love spell, submitted by Alicia J. When I was 19, I fell for a guy who barely noticed me. Desperate, I went to a woman in New Orleans. People whispered about a voodoo worker who made love happen. She gave me a small red pouch with herbs, bones, and told me to bury it under his doorstep. That night, I dreamt of him. Except it wasn't him. It was something wearing his face. His smile stretched too wide, and when he kissed me, I tasted blood. I woke with scratches on my chest like fingernails had dragged across me. The pouch was warm when I touched it. Within days, he started noticing me too much. He'd show up at my job, stand outside my window at night, just staring. His eyes looked different, darker, almost hollow. He told me he dreamed of fire every night and of someone whispering my name through the flames. I panicked and went back to the woman. She shook her head and said, "Child, you didn't bring him to you. You brought something through him." She burned incense and prayed, but when she poured out the pouch, the herbs were crawling with live maggots. I broke things off, but it didn't matter. Weeks later, he drove into the bayou and never came back. They found his truck, but his body was gone. Sometimes I still dream of him standing at the foot of my bed, dripping wet, smiling with those hollow eyes. Man, messing with love spells and black magic, and the guy starts showing up in your dreams, haunted by someone else's energy, that's terrifying. I'd never mess with that stuff. Possession, submitted by Derek H. I was a beat cop, called to a domestic disturbance in a small apartment complex. The neighbors said they heard screaming all night. When I arrived, the front door was cracked, and I heard growling from inside. At first, I thought it was a fight, but it wasn't human. Inside, a man was sitting in the living room, shaking violently. His eyes were rolled back, and his voice didn't sound like him. It was guttural, deep, and dripping with rage. He screamed in languages I didn't recognize, words that burned my ears like static electricity. I drew my taser and shouted commands, but he laughed well. Something other than him laughed. The room temperature dropped, and the walls seemed to pulse. I felt pressure in my chest, like something invisible was pushing me back. I couldn't move my feet. Suddenly, the figure leapt across the room with impossible speed, slamming into the wall, leaving a dent bigger than a human body should make. I fired my taser, hit him in the shoulder, and the electricity arced in the air. But the growl didn't stop. It was coming from the shadows around me. Backup arrived, and when they pulled him out, he looked normal, just a terrified, sweaty man. But later, they told me his apartment was trashed, furniture split, walls scorched, and claw marks all over the floor. The man never spoke again about that night, but I swear, whatever it wasn't human. Whoa, a guy possessed during a domestic call, moving faster than humanly possible, with shadows and pressure on the chest? That's exactly the type of encounter that makes you rethink everything about reality. The back seat, submitted by Louis M. I used to work late shifts as a cab driver in Mexico City. One night, I picked up a woman on the outskirts of town. She was beautiful but pale, wearing red. She didn't speak, just slid into the back seat and stared at the window. As I drove, I noticed her reflection wasn't matching her movements. When I looked at her face directly, her eyes were black, completely black, and her smile stretched wider than humanly possible. I slammed the brakes, and she didn't move. Didn't scream, just smiled. Suddenly, the streetlights flickered out, and the radio went static. I tried to pull over, but the pedals felt frozen under my feet. She leaned forward from the back seat, and I felt a cold hand brush my shoulder. My heart was pounding. I couldn't breathe. I spun around to look again, and she was gone. The back seat was empty. I stopped the cab in the middle of the street, shaking, thinking I had hallucinated it, but the smell of burnt perfume lingered, thick and sour. Weeks later, I heard from other drivers that a woman in red had been seen getting into cabs at night, disappearing without a trace. Some say she was a prostitute who died violently and now lures men into her car, never to be seen again. Dude, a woman in red, pale, wet, eyes black, sitting in the back of your cab at night? That's some horror movie level stuff. I'd never pick up anyone alone after dark again. Sleep paralysis? Submitted by Carla D. I've had sleep paralysis before, but last winter it scared me more than anything. I woke up in the middle of the night, eyes open, body frozen. I could see my ceiling fan spinning slowly. The clock read 3:11 a.m. I tried to roll over, but nothing moved. My chest felt heavy, like someone was on it. Then I heard what sounded like footsteps in the hallway. Slow, soft, like bare feet on wood. I knew no one else was home. My door creaked, even though it was shut. Out of the corner of my eye, a shadow stretched across the floor, taller than it should have been. The shape stood near the end of my bed. I couldn't make out a face, but I could feel it staring. My ears filled with this deep buzzing sound like static on a TV, and my breathing grew shallow. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a faint gasp. It felt like the shadow leaned over me. I couldn't see details, but I swear I felt air move across my cheek, almost like someone breathing. I wanted to shut my eyes, but couldn't. Every second felt like an hour. Then suddenly it was gone. I blinked, and my body jerked free. The buzzing stopped. The room was silent again. The scariest part? The door was still closed, just like I'd left it. Man, being frozen in bed, hearing footsteps, seeing a shadow leaning over you, that's exactly what nightmares are made of. Sleep paralysis is terrifying enough without making it feel alive. Grave robbing, submitted by Evan R. When I was 19, some friends dared me to steal something from an old cemetery outside town. We'd heard stories about people buried with jewelry, so I picked a grave with a cracked headstone. Half drunk, I pried a silver locket from the dirt on top of the coffin lid. That night, I started hearing things. First it was scratching sounds in my room, then the sound of breathing when I knew I was alone. I told myself it was in my head, but every time I looked at the locket, it felt colder, like holding ice. By the third night, the dreams started. A woman in a tattered dress stood at the foot of my bed, her jaw hanging loose, eyes milky white. She never moved, just stared. When I woke up, the air smelled like soil and mold. The locket was always right next to my pillow, no matter where I left it. I panicked and went back to the cemetery to return it, but when I tried to leave the locket, it slipped from my hand 3 times like it wouldn't stay. On the 4th, I dropped it and ran without looking back. I didn't sleep for days. 2 weeks later, my house caught fire in the middle of the night. Investigators said it started in my bedroom, but they couldn't find the source. The only thing left unburned, that silver locket, sitting on the charred remains of my nightstand. Holy shit. Stealing something from a grave, hearing, crying, seeing shadows, then the house burns down with the locket left untouched. That's classic cursed object stuff. I wouldn't touch anything like that. The Abandoned House, submitted by Daniel K. I was homeless for almost 2 years, and the nights were the worst. One winter, I found an abandoned house to crash in. The windows were broken, walls covered in graffiti. I thought it was lucky shelter from the cold, but from the first night, something felt wrong. I'd hear footsteps upstairs, heavy and slow, even though I was the only one inside. Sometimes, I'd wake up to whispers echoing through the hall, voices overlapping, too faint to make out. I told myself it was just wind through the cracks. One night, I woke up freezing. My blanket was gone. I sat up and saw a figure standing in the corner, hunched, swaying back and forth. No face, just this outline darker than the dark. When I blinked, it was suddenly closer, like it had glided across the floor. I bolted outside and slept behind a gas station that night. The next day, I went back for my stuff. But the blanket I'd brought was folded neatly on the floor, and next to it was a pile of old children's shoes, stacked like someone had placed them there for me to find. I never went back. To this day, I can't sleep near abandoned buildings. The streets were rough, but whatever was in that house made me feel like I was one step away from disappearing. Dude, someone living in an abandoned house, hearing footsteps, whispers, shadows, then finding old children's shoes stacked? That's eerie as hell. You feel that kind of fear in your bones? Schizophrenia. Submitted by Marcus J. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 22. Most of the time, I can tell when my mind's playing tricks. But one night, it felt too real. I was lying in bed when I heard a knock on my window, 3rd floor. No fire escape. I told myself it was a hallucination, but then the glass rattled. Hard. I pulled the curtain back and saw a pale face pressed against the window. Its mouth was too wide, eyes black. I closed my eyes, telling myself it wasn't there. When I opened them, the face was gone, but my bedroom door creaked open, and I heard bare feet shuffle across the floor. My meds make me drowsy, but in that moment, I was wide awake. Something leaned down close to my ear and whispered my name. I stayed frozen until morning. When I finally got up, I saw muddy footprints on the floor leading to my bed. The doctor said it was part of my illness, but I've never hallucinated footprints before. To this day, I don't know if it was my mind or something darker using my illness as cover. Wow. Hallucinations so real you can't tell if it's your mind or something else? That blurring between mental illness and the paranormal is terrifying. Makes you question what reality even is. Termination. Submitted by Angela P. When I was 19, I had a termination. I don't regret the choice, but the weeks after were strange. At night, I'd wake up to the sound of crying soft at first, like it came from another room. I lived alone in a studio apartment, so it didn't make sense. The crying got louder. Sometimes it sounded like it was right next to me, like a baby's wail pressed against my ear. I'd search my apartment at 2 a.m. with all the lights on, but there was never anything there. Then came the shadows. In the corner of my vision, I'd see a small figure crouched by the bed. When I turned my head, it would dart away. But once I woke to see it standing over me, tiny handprints pressed against my blanket. I tried talking to a therapist about it, and she said it was guilt manifesting. Maybe she's right. But one night, I woke to find the crying had stopped, and a whisper replaced it. It said my name. My whole body froze. It's been years now, and I still hear faint crying if I'm awake past midnight. I don't know if it's in my head, or if something followed me from that clinic. Either way, I sleep with the TV on every night. Man, hearing crying at night, seeing a small figure, whispers in your apartment after a traumatic event, that's heavy. Not just scary, but emotionally intense too. The operation, submitted by Ethan R. I went in for a routine operation last year. They sedated me, and I remember drifting off. At first, it was peaceful. Then things got strange. I felt weightless, like my body wasn't mine anymore. The lights above me stretched, bending like liquid. The monitors beeped in impossible rhythms. I saw shadows on the walls twisting, stretching toward me, reaching with long, clawed fingers that didn't exist in reality. I started hearing whispers, soft at first, then louder, echoing in the operating room. The voices weren't human. They didn't make sense, just syllables and hissing. I tried to move, scream, open my eyes, but I couldn't. Then, suddenly, I was somewhere else. A bright corridor, endless, with figures in surgical masks, but their eyes were black voids. They moved without sound, passing through walls. I felt myself being pulled forward, unable to resist. I woke up hours later, the surgery over, with my heart pounding. Nothing on the monitors had recorded anything unusual, but I know what I saw, and I swear, every time I close my eyes at night, I feel like I'm still floating in that endless corridor. Dude, drifting under anesthesia, Seeing corridors with faceless figures, monitors beeping in impossible rhythms. That's some in-hospital horror. Makes you afraid to close your eyes before surgery. Haunted by Amada. Submitted by Min T. When I was a kid, my grandmother warned me never to wander near the abandoned pagoda outside our village. They said it was haunted by Amada, a vengeful spirit of a monk who died unfairly. Of course, I didn't listen. One afternoon, I snuck in. The air was thick and humid, but somehow colder than the rest of the village. The courtyard was overgrown, statues cracked, and incense burned, even though no one had been there for years. I heard chanting soft, echoing through the hallways. Shadows flickered across the walls, but when I turned, no one was there. Then I saw it, a figure in tattered orange robes, face hidden under a hood, moving toward me slowly. My legs froze. The figure stopped a few feet away and raised a hand. I could feel a pressure in my chest, like it was reaching into my soul. The chanting grew louder, 1,000 voices layered into one bone-chilling sound. I ran without looking back. When I finally reached the village, I looked over my shoulder. Statues in the pagoda courtyard seemed to be watching me, their cracked eyes glinting in the sunlight. I've never gone near that place again. Yo, haunting an abandoned pagoda, chanting, pressing into your chest. That's classic folklore, meeting reality. I would never sneak into that place as a kid. Ring doorbell, submitted by Maya L. I live alone in an older neighborhood, so I installed a Ring doorbell for peace of mind. A few nights after, I started getting motion alerts around 2 a.m., but when I checked the live feed, the driveway was always empty. Then the notifications got personal. The Ring showed someone standing right in front of my door, staring straight at the camera. The thing was blurry, but I could make out a face pale, expressionless, and wet, like it had been submerged in water. I called the police once, thinking someone was messing with me, but they found nothing. No prints, no footprints. My neighbor said nothing unusual had been seen, and yet, every night, the alerts kept coming, sometimes more than once, all pointing right at the door. One night, I saw it move. On the live feed, the figure raised its hand and pressed its palm against the camera lens. I could feel it in the room with me, even though the front door was locked. The motion alerts kept pinging as it lingered outside for hours. The last time I checked the feed, I froze. The figure was gone, but a new notification popped up. Someone is at your back door. I ran upstairs, but there was nothing there. That night, I unplugged the Ring. I haven't slept well since. Man, these stories always blow my mind. You can be the most logical person in the world, but when you hear stuff like this from people who really believe what happened to them, it makes you wonder. Is it just the brain firing off in extreme moments, or is there something bigger, something we can't measure? The thing that gets me is how universal this is. Doesn't matter if you're in the US, Bangladesh, Romania, wherever, you've got shadows, spirits, curses, black magic. Cultures that never interacted are describing the same kinds of things. I don't know what's scarier, that there's nothing after death or that there is, and sometimes it leaks through. Either way, hearing these stories is like peeking behind a curtain we're not supposed to look behind, and maybe that's why they stick with you. So yeah, keep an open mind, stay curious, and maybe don't go poking around abandoned forests or messing with rituals you don't understand. Some doors don't close once you've opened them. All right, we're out of here. Stay safe, everybody.